Before I start, I just want to say that I am an agnostic atheist, meaning I do not believe in a God because I have not been presented with any sufficient evidence for a God. However, I don't claim to know the unknowable, so these arguments are not refuting the entire concept of a God, but instead, I will be focusing on the absurdity of Christianity. Look, the fact is, the concept of a God has never been proven. God is an assumption. There's never been a single piece of tangible evidence that would prove any God's existence. This logically pulls the rug out from underneath the whole structure of any religion that worships a personal God. Have you ever played Jenga? Imagine yanking the whole bottom layer out. The whole tower comes crashing down. Every far-fetched story and account of magic done by an invisible wizard in the sky, and by extension, the entire sketchy moral framework and self-righteous reasons to discriminate against those born of a different sexual persuasion. It all has no basis. Religious moderates always complain when skeptics refute the Bible in a literal way, when they rip apart its stupid and impossible fairy tales. But I think this is how it should be done. If this omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent God produced what would be the most important message to mankind, the one and only true way to save our souls from eternal damnation, why would he distort it with a bunch of far-fetched and unbelievable stories? Why would he make it so that when our educated modern society reads it, it seems nonsensical? After all, your definition of a God is meant to be omniscient. He knows all there is to know, and all that ever will be known.
How can he not predict this? How could he not realize that by filling it with this garbage with infinite room for interpretation, that his own church alone would split into over 38,000 denominations? Each one of these subdivisions contradict each other on fundamental issues about morality and what God would truly want us to do, each distorting his word more and more with every new denomination, leaving his worshippers unsure of which one is the true, undistorted pathway to salvation.
Humans were not created instantaneously from dust and breath. They evolved over millions of years from simpler life origins. Why is it that the Bible states that the moon is made of light? We know to have found out this is clearly not the case. To me, it sounds more like ancient man trying to explain things he did not understand. He looked up at the night sky, and he saw the sun's light reflected on the moon, but he did not see the sun. Thus, the moon seemed to be a light source of its own. Doesn't sound like divine wisdom to me. The more we find out about the universe and our origins through science and reason, the more cherry-picking believers have to do. And this is my point. If there was a loving God trying to save our eternal souls with this infinitely important message, why would he allow the holiest of books to be indistinguishable from a fairy tale? If Christianity was correct, the Christian God would either have to be a deceiving monster or just plain incompetent. It would mean that he chose to spread this information through the text of a dying language, leaving future generations with only a series of questionable translations. I mean, consider a blind, deaf, and dumb person. How can they possibly be saved? What about people that live and die in cultures that have a different religion? A common counter-argument that is often used by apologists is that the book was written by humans and has been through countless translations and has been changed by dishonest rulers to suit their own selfish demands. In other words, the religion has been hijacked. However, if God actually existed outside the imagination of the faithful, then why didn't he correct this? It would be completely immoral for an all-knowing and all-loving God to allow this to happen. Through inaction, he would be allowing countless souls to be lost to false teachings. Most religions have a lot in common. They're all irrational, primitive death cults and insist on afterlife fictions. Now, despite all this common ground, they find each other's claims entirely unconvincing and often violently blasphemous. It is entirely ludicrous that today's society considers faith a virtue.
By choosing faith over critical judgment and by choosing to ignore all the obvious factual errors in the Bible, you are choosing to delude yourself. You are ignoring countless impossible stories and questionable morals like slavery and the contemptuous view on women's rights in order to cherry-pick what you agree with.
The Bible is filled with countless and often contradictory themes and stories that the mind can project what it wants out of it. This is why we cherry-pick. A Christian will say how good the Bible is by citing the apparently divine wisdom of the Golden Rule, and then deliberately ignore the pro-slavery passages. God says it's not just acceptable to own slaves, but it's also perfectly fine to beat them to death. Well, of course, as long as they don't take a couple days to die. And on to Jesus' family values. The Prince of Peace came not to bring peace, but to bring division and to set family members against each other. Now that is royally fucked up, and it's promoted by the Bible. Now look, Science changes according to the facts and evidence presented. Religion only changes when it outrages society. If blind faith is your pathway to truth, then how can you differentiate between the other religions and your own? They all lack the support of any evidence. If all of your answers come from a single book, then how can you distinguish the Bible or Quran from the fable of Peter Pan?